Good morning, everyone, or good evening and afternoon for those of us that are joining us from Europe and looks like Canada and US this morning. So we have a wide-reaching session out there. Rita, I'm just going to start with a comms check to make sure you can see my screen, hear me, and that you are online.
Yep, all of the above are true, hopefully.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to a Pennant free webinar session. My name is Tammy Holter. I am the Managing Director of the Pennant ISS division, and I will be your host today. Joining me in this session on R4i Illustrated Parts Data Manager, or R4i IPD Manager, as we fondly call it, I have our presenter today, Rita Nye, who is a Senior Consultant for Pennant Australasia. Good morning, Rita.
Morning, Tammy.
You will notice a little bit of joint branding going on. You may have seen the announcement in February this year. Pennant acquired Absolute Data Group, and with that our sister company OneStrand in the US. So you will see a little bit of joint branding. You'll often still get the marketing coming out from OneStrand, announcements on Twitter and LinkedIn as we're changing up. And the one thing that you will see all the time that will remain consistent as we remove the ADG and OneStrand brands will be the R4i brand, which is of course our software product brand. So moving forward, you'll tend to see Pennant with the R4i software brand when we're running a session on an R4i product. For those who may not have been exposed to all of the R4i product suite, so we have some people who are not R4i customers yet. These are the core customers in our suite. We have a suite of about 16 different products and tools and modules. The R4i CSDB, or Common Source Database, is used to manage and publish your critical content to IETP or IETM for electronic delivery. R4i Writer is our powerful XML authoring tool, which is optimized for the S1000D format. So it comes shipped with all of the XML versions of S1000D schemas, templates mapped, and style sheets for preview available in that. It comes in a personal edition as well if you don't have a common source database. R4i Viewer is our royalty-free online and offline IETM or IETP viewer. And R4i Binder is our powerful drag and drop tool for creating handbooks and manuals on the fly. All of our products don't necessarily work with just S1000D. They work with any HTML or XML. So your legacy specifications can also be stored in the CSDB and, of course, published via R4i Binder and in the IETP as well. Today, of course, the product is R4i IPD, which is the next one on the list there, which is a time-saving tool that automatically generates hundreds of illustrated parts data modules within a few minutes from an engineering spreadsheet, database, parts database, CAD/CAM, etc. And just to mention that these core products that we've listed here as well are also available as a hosted S1000D platform on R4i Air. So again, that's our legacy shop where we had the OneStrand products, and you'll see the rebadging to everything being Pennant and just the R4i branding there. So the hosted platform offers the same capability as you would have if you installed, but some customers prefer to not do installs on their own site anymore, and so it is available in the cloud. The common source database is up there in the cloud for you. We maintain it for you, back it up for you, and otherwise you have full control over it. Your presenter today is Ms. Rita Nye. Good morning, Rita.
G'day.
That's very Australian of you, Rita.
Sorry, it's kind of what I feel like today. It's been a long week already.
I know. It's, what is it, Wednesday morning? And yeah, it feels like Friday, doesn't it? So
I think it's Friday next week, actually.
Yeah. So Rita, if you have not had the opportunity to meet Rita, is a senior consultant who has come obviously from the Absolute Data Group and OneStrand teams and now is part of Pennant Australasia. Rita has over 15 years experience in IT, including HTML and XML publishing over the years, including product analysis and development as well. The last 13 years, Rita has specialised specifically in S1000D and, of course, the dynamic publishing projects that come with that, including web and complex print requirements. She is a trainer in S1000D topics and, of course, our R4i product suite, as well as training in some of the legacy tools that our customers may still utilise, such as Arbortext Editor or Adobe FrameMaker. Rita is well known for her style sheet development, including XSLT, and in particular her faux development, which we love her doing. Thank you, Rita.
Thanks.
So I am going to hand over to you, Rita, so that we can get into this session now that all of the housekeeping is done.
Excellent. So what I thought I'd do first of all, Tam, is actually let's start with a poll. So what we want to know at the moment is from all of the attendees, how do they currently extract their parts data? So what do they do? So do they have some sort of PLM or parts database that they have and they extract them out? So the choices are you don't have anything at the moment, so you literally have to manually create your IPD data modules. If you've got a parts database, do you have some sort of method of being able to extract that information out? So you've got your graphics and the data, say, in a spreadsheet format, and then you do some sort of copy-paste function for that to get it into your data modules? Or do you have some other method? And if you do have another method, if you could pop that information into the question panel, just to give us an idea of how people are currently dealing with their parts data.
Fantastic. Okay, so let me launch this poll for you then, Rita. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
That is now up on the screen. So if you can share with us that currently you don't have a way to get your parts data into IPDs, you manually type them, or you paste perhaps from spreadsheets or data that the engineers supply you, or perhaps you have some other method. So we'll just give everyone a few minutes to get those votes in. We have 60% of the votes in already, Rita, so we'll just give everyone a few more minutes. Sometimes we find if people are on Apple devices, they find it a little bit more difficult to do the voting than on the Windows devices. We are now 80% in, almost there. So a couple more votes to get in there yet, Rita.
That's fine. Happy to give them a chance to be able to populate their the poll.
Yeah, and we do have one in here. So someone has shared they've got Amiga PS exports that they use. So they export their parts data from Amiga PS. And of course, yep. We ran a session recently on that, didn't we, Rita, on R4i
We did.
LTS while we were just waiting for that last vote. So a couple of months ago, we ran a session on R4i LTS where we are able to extract from an LSAR. In this particular case, we're utilising Amiga PS, of course, and we extracted the procedural content as well as illustrated parts data from the Amiga system. So that, of course, an LSAR holds a little bit more content than just the parts data, so that's the advantage of taking it from an LSA system. So, correct. Okay, so I think we'll hold that there, Rita. We still have a few more votes to get in. We'll close the poll and share what we did get on the screen. So we ended up with 50% of people saying they don't currently have an automated way. They just potentially just type their parts IPD data modules. 25% yep. Are using going out to spreadsheets, etc., and then copying and pasting. And another 25% are using other systems, of which, and let me just see what the other ones were that we got in there as well. Let me just see. Yes, so I am going to hide this poll so that you can kick off. I'll just tell you when that's hidden. And yes, we did have a question as well about whether the R4i LTS webinar with Amiga PS, whether that was available for viewing. And yes, we do record all of our webinar sessions, and they are available. So I will pass on that you're interested in seeing that particular webinar as well, and Samantha Hocking will connect with you to give you a link to log in and take a look at that. So
excellent.
Let's hide this panel. It's hidden, Rita, and you are now in control again.
Okay, so what we wanted to do first of all was give a little bit of a chat process in terms of what we're looking at and what some of the benefits for it. So the tool that we're going to mainly focus on today is IPD Manager. So IPD Manager has been specifically designed to be able to get content in any format. It could be coming from a parts database, it could be coming from any sort of source location, even to the point some customers actually prefer to create their IPD data as spreadsheets and then you use IPD Manager to actually convert them. So it is a tool for being able to create IPD data modules. That's its whole purpose. The benefit of being able to use this tool is that IPD is most probably one of the schemas that no one likes to write. It's not an easy schema to work with. It's got a lot of different options and a lot of different capabilities. So by being able to go through this process of having a tool that can actually create them, it's a much more efficient way to be able to do that process. So that's one of the biggest benefits that we have with IPD Manager, is it literally does take a lot of the pain away. And as you go through, and when we actually bring up the tool itself, you'll see that the method of creating those IPD data modules, because of the fact that we're able to process these and it's going through and grabbing all of the content, it's a lot faster than us having to actually write that content. So by the time I demonstrate the process of the data into IPD data modules, if I was writing that as a data module, if I had to start from Go, I might get part of my ID status section written by the time this is actually finished processing all of the files. So it is a much more efficient way of being able to generate your IPD data. So what we're going to look at now, we have run previous webinars on this tool, and in the previous webinars we've really focused on the mapping side of it. How do we physically get to the point of having the capabilities to generate? In this session, what we thought, instead of focusing heavily on the mapping side of it, what we'd look at is actually go through the process of looking all of our preferences, what we can do with this. I'm going to point and show what we've done in terms of what the mapping file is. I'm not going to actually go into it. We literally just don't have time to do that. But I'll explain. It's a wizard process, so we'll be able to have a little bit of a conversation on that. This tool can also just monitor for content. So what this means is that we can literally have this sitting on a computer and you just add data into its source directory that's been defined by the tool, and once it goes into that folder, IPD Manager just automatically runs. So it doesn't need to think about, oh, it needs to have an actual human come in and click on the run button. We can literally get this just to be monitored and managed, so it literally just processes the information. Obviously, during that process function, it can also add the content into the CSDB as well. So we're going to be able to see this process of it actually pushing content into the CSDB. And then what I thought would be beneficial is, once we've processed this data, actually generate an IETP and then open that IETP up just so you can have a look at the end result of that content. So it will give you the ability to be able to see how do we get the content, process it, and then view it. So it just gives you that full process of what we're looking at. So taking that into account, what I thought would be beneficial would be just to highlight all of the different tools that we're going to be working with. And we're going to be focusing on 3 of our core tools. Obviously, the first one is IPD Manager, and it's the tool that's actually going to process all of these source files so that we can get them into the format. And I'm going to have it set so that that content can be automatically checked into the CSDB. And I'm also going to have it set to be published automatically, and I'll explain that process as we're going through. It's not something that we would really recommend because obviously from an engineering perspective, once that content has been processed, it's got to be validated and verified. So you wouldn't normally publish, but I'm going to just to make this process a little bit easier. And then part of the CSDB, I'm going to load the Media Gen window, and I'm going to build an IETP. So I'm just going to quickly generate that content that we've just added into the CSDB for the IPD data only. I'm just going to generate that into an IETP. And then from there, I'm going to open that IETP up with R4i Viewer. So you'll get to see 3 of the core products of our suite. So with that, let's just close that. Here's IPD Manager. Now, as I said, IPD Manager, it is a tool that we use for the generation of illustrated parts information. And as I said, IPD schemas, it's most probably one of the schemas that no one really likes to work with. So with this tool, it could run on a user's workstation. It could even run on a server if you wanted to. So it's got quite a bit of versatility with that. But what we need to do first, before we actually go through this process of actually running content, we need to understand the interface and identify what's our different options and capabilities. So if I jump into our settings toolbar, what we have here is, first of all, we've got our repository section. So we can set our CSDB connection, and I'm just connecting to a sample database, which you can actually see sitting behind us here on screen. So you've got the CSDB in the background. So I've connected to that database, and so by having that connection, what it does is it starts to give us some extra options. So the first one is I can do a check-in, which means that as these data modules are created, they can actually physically be checked into the CSDB. And I've also got them marked as published. Now, as I said, we wouldn't normally do a publish as part of the process. We make it as an option for customers because it's their choice. But as I said, what you would normally do is you'd add the content, and then you'd want to do some verification with that. We know that the data modules are going to be valid to the schema because that's the whole purpose of generating this content. But there's no Brex validation with this. There's no actual QA process to say, hey, the content that's been extracted from the parts database, is that actually the data that we wanted, or has there been some additional data that's come through? So you've still got to go through and do some logical QA processes with this. But for this particular example, I'm going to actually publish it just to make it a little bit faster for the demonstration purposes. With that, we've also got, do we want to remove the local files? So that means that once those files have been checked into the CSDB, the data modules and the ICNs that have been created, do we want to delete those from our working location? So again, it's a choice for you. The next one is, what status do we want it to set to? Now, this is a virtual workflow process that's available inside the CSDB. When you get a brand new database, it's set to only one status setting at baseline, but you can add as many status settings as you want. And because I've done the connection to the CSDB, the status settings, and I don't have any other than baseline, I haven't added any, but you'd literally have a drop-down list of all of the different status settings. And these status settings can be used for management purposes, so they can be part of the process for generating reports.
So Rita, as an example, I guess a classic, and based on what you just said a few minutes ago about what you would normally do, you'd probably either assign this to in work or in QA or due for QA or something like
Correct.
that would make sense if you're going to auto-check it into the CSDB, right?
Correct, yes. So this then means that as the system administrators, we can jump into the CSDB and we can look at our content and know what status every single data module is at. So it's not just part of IPD Manager. That status setting is available in all of our products, all of our authoring environments. So it gives you that extra capability. Okay, then we have our process settings. So this is the data that we're generating out of our parts database, as an example. What do we do with these? So we've got the options, move the data files. So if we're if we've got auto process turned on, obviously what we want to do is we don't want to keep those in our source path. So here's my source directory. So if I kept those files in that source directory all the time and I didn't move them, what would happen is the system would just constantly go through and process those files. So you obviously want to move the files after they've been processed, because that then stops the tool from actually reprocessing them time after time after time. If I was doing development of a mapping file and I want to test it and see does it work correctly, I might also turn on the prompt for preview, because I want to verify, is it looking correct? So again, for an auto process function, you wouldn't necessarily do that. You would only do that if we were actually going through and wanting to test a particular function to make sure that that component or section of the IPD that we've just changed, we might have just done an update to our style sheet to be able to render it. So we want to test that and say, is that working correctly? So that's when we would do a prompt for preview. Overwrite duplicates. So obviously, because we're extracting content out of some sort of parts database, there is always the possibility that that information could come out multiple times. So if that does occur, what do we want it to do? So I've just said overwrite duplicates, just so that if there is multiple variants of that content, whatever is the last file, that's the file that's going to be processed and going to be finally end up inside the CSDB.
Now, Rita, you're not referring to, of course, an update, right? That's a completely different thing where you actually have a new issue of the same data module, right?
Correct. This is purely your source files. The parts database may actually extract that information in multiple. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all based on how do you get your content out of that parts database.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay. We also have the option to be able to create empty ones if we needed to. I'm not going to go through that process here, but if we did, we could do so. We've also got some advanced settings. Now, with the advanced settings, this has got nothing to do with IPD Manager in terms of its processing side of it in general. But first of all, we've got our preview settings. So with that, we can use the style sheet. So I've got it set for use local style sheet to be false, which means that I'm using the style sheet that's actually physically stored inside my CSDB, which of course is the most logical way to do it, because if you are doing any style sheet updates, they're going to be checked back into the CSDB, so you don't want to have to keep a local copy of that. But you might want to have a separate style sheet if it was the case. If you wanted to do it for, say, a new customer presentation, you may want to have a slight tweak done to the style sheet. So then, yes, absolutely, you could point it to a local style sheet. And obviously, with our style sheets, if there were any supporting files such as JavaScript or cascading style sheets, we would also need to know where those are located as well. So you'd turn it to true, you'd select where that style sheet is, and you'd also select the folder where all of the supporting files are located. So it just gives us that ability to do that. And the last one in the preview is, where do we want the image panel to be displayed? Do we want it to be left or right? So again, we can choose that. So traditionally, when you're looking at IPD, you'd have your graphic on your left and your table of content on the right. So you can choose to have that presentation in your preview as well. Now, what we did do with this particular tool, we had some customers that were actually using the Larson Auto Hotspotter tool, and they wanted that tool to run over the graphics before they were actually physically processed. So we've implemented it. So obviously our tool doesn't supply this Auto Hotspotter tool. That's a separate company. You do actually need to go to them to purchase that tool. But if you have purchased it, obviously it would need to be installed on the same machine that IPD Manager is located, and you would simply select the enabled, click on the lookup button to navigate to where the executable is for that tool, and there's also a configuration file that needs to be developed to know how to hotspot those graphics. So you'd also point to the execute the configuration file, And what this does is it actually loads up a DOS command window. So we've also got the option there to hide that command window so that you don't have a floating DOS window sitting open on your screen. So again, it's your choice in terms of whether or not we're using it. But it does give us those extra capabilities. Okay, so we've now got a bit of an understanding of the actual settings that are available with IPD Manager. And with this, as I said, here's my source directory. So this is where I'm waiting for my content to load. And as you saw in my settings, I've got it set to auto process. Now with this, you can see I've got an IPD map name here. And with this, if I wanted to manually run a process, I'd simply come across and click onto the blue arrow, and that would then run. So if I didn't have the auto process turned on, I could have files sitting in my source directory, and I would make that choice of when I wanted to run those files. So that's how we would go through the process. Obviously, if we've got different customers and we have different IPD requirements for each of those customers, and let's say we've only got one IPD license, I could have 3 different IPD mapping tools inside IPD Manager. That would obviously mean auto process can't be run because it doesn't have the configuration to say, if I go into this folder, this is actually customer A's data, or if I go to add this content, this is actually customer B's data. So that's obviously where you would have to go through and do a manual process. Or alternatively, if you've got multiple licenses for IPD Manager, you could have multiple IPD managers running, and they could point to different source directories, and you could have different mappings in each one of those. So there are options available with what has to go through. So as I said, we have previously done a webinar on how to build the mapping. It is quite an involved process. It is a wizard method, but you do need to really sit down and analyze your requirements before you can actually go through the process of generating that mapping. So there's a fair bit of configuration that has to occur. So what I want to do here is I actually want to add some content into my source directory, and from there I'm going to get the tool to automatically run. So what I've got here is, here's my files that I want to run. So I'm just going to copy those and bring them up into my source location, and I'm just going to paste them in there. So as if I was generating this content out of a parts database. So I'm just going to put them into that directory, and even before I get the full amount pasted in, the tool has actually started to run. So we can see here it's going through and it's processing all of this content. And as I said, by the time this is finished, the chances are that I might have some of the ID status block or the identification and status section already populated inside a data module if I was manually authoring this. But I certainly wouldn't be getting all of these data modules produced in the time that this tool is running. But we can see it's going through fairly quickly. It's still got to obviously analyze everything. It's got to process it all. It's got to identify everything, and it's also got to physically check the files into the CSDB, and it's also got to publish those files. So there's a fair bit that's actually going through and identifying what's actually happening in the background. Okay, so we're almost finished. There we go. So we can see here that it's gone through, and you can also see in the activity log, it's actually reporting everything that it's doing. So you can see here that it has processed the information, it saved the data module into an output location. It's also showed that the illustration has been checked into the CSDB, and so we've got a couple different illustrations. We've also got the data modules have been successfully checked in, and they've also been published. So we can see all of that information has been written into the activity log, so we know that this has all occurred. So it's done all of the hard work for us, which means now I get to come into the CSDB. Now, because I've got the CSDB already open, and I've got a knowledge of what's there at the moment. Because I've now added content, I'm just going to quickly click onto my refresh button. And you can see here that I've got two folders. I've got IPD New Data Modules, which has just created a child folder. And if I go to that child folder, you can actually see here's all of my data modules. And because I've got it set to my references panel, we can actually see all of the associations that are involved with this. So for this particular data module here, it shows that I've got a graphic, but I'm also supposed to have a technical publication. Now, obviously, I haven't added that tech pub in, so it hasn't come through, but it gives me the knowledge of what needs to happen with this content. And I can select any one of these data modules to see that same process. So during that check-in process that IPD Manager has done, it's added the data modules and they've gone into the repository, but it's also added the images and they put the images into the image store. So you do get your content being added correctly into the CSDB, into their relevant locations. So we know that the content has been able to come through. This is the stage where you would then do your QA process. So this is where you would have someone who would actually physically look at this data, possibly run a Brex validation over it, because we haven't done any Brex validation with this. We have literally just created the data. But you would go through and do your QA process. As I said, I've marked these to be published, so you can see all of the data modules have got the blue icon against them. And also the folder structure has also got the blue icon. The blue icon is literally our visual indicator to say that this file or folder has been marked as published. And it's a visual indicator to say this content can be included into a delivery. So that's all that the published flag does. It doesn't tell us that we have actually physically published this content or issued this content to a customer. It's just saying it's available for use. And we can see the same thing if I go down to my images. All of the images have been published and so is my folder structure. So I know that everything is ready. So at this point, what I want to be able to do is actually generate an IETP. And to do that, I click onto my Create IETP and that will load my Media Gen window. And once that comes up, so it's actually got to identify everything inside the CSDB as to what is marked as published. And here's our Media Gen window. Now, I'm not going to go through all the options. I'm literally just going to highlight a few of the different options. So first of all, I'm just going to call it IPD, and I've got an output path. Where do I want this content to be written to? So I'm just going to write to one of my local drives, so it's there, and I'm doing an R4i Viewer IETP because I want to use R4i Viewer to be able to see this content. What I need to do then is come to my Info Sets tab, and if I come down into my repository, here's all of my data modules that I have just generated. I want those, so I don't want it to go into this lovely big long file name that I've got there, which is actually my date and time that the files were added into the CSDB. I want to have a short name, so instead of dragging the folder over, I'm just going to create a virtual info set, and I'm just going to call it IPD. And then I'm just going to highlight all of those data modules, and I'm just going to drag those over to my IPD folder. So it's as hard as that to be able to start building your IPD structure, or sorry, your IETP structure. Now, with this, you get to make the decision on how you're going to build that structure. You can replicate how you've got it inside your CSDB. You could generate from a publication module. It's really dependent on how you want to build this content. And then once you've built your IETP structure, you've also got the options here for how you can start to customize that presentation. So we can have a splash, a banner, a landing page, a disclaimer. All of these can be configured during this IETP build process. I'm going to do just some generic at this point in time. I'm literally just going to leave it with no customization. And with that, if I come across to my parts identification, with that, what we want is I want to identify my IPD schema. Hang on 2 secs. Now, I happen to know that this data is actually issue 4 data. So you can see here the very top one is issue 4 IPD. So I'm just going to turn that. You can see it's been turned on. The reason I want that is because of my preferences. Now, in our preferences over here on the document window, we've got 2 checkboxes. One which is to swap the image and the document panes when viewing parts data. So because I've selected my IPD schema in my parts identification tab, what that's going to do is it's going to switch my data module view. So that means I'm going to get my image on the left-hand side and my table on the right-hand side. So I get that traditional IPD presentation. Additionally, the second checkbox is to automatically open parts images. Now, IPD is quite a unique schema in that in most schemas what you would do is you would have a para of content, and inside that para you'd put an internal cross-reference to the figure. And what would happen is inside your data module, when you wanted to view that graphic, you'd click onto the internal cross-reference and it would open up the illustration, allowing you to view the image and be able to see the content and the image at the same time. Parts data doesn't have that. So the only way you can get the image to open is to either have this option of automatically open it, or you have to manually launch to view the graphic. So we've made it a little bit easier for you to say, look, if it's a parts image or images, so you could have multiple images in an IPD data module, we can automatically get those to launch for you when the data module is opened. So they're the extra options that we're looking at from that side of it. And if I then jump to my Progress tab, I simply click on Start. And because I'm writing to an output location that I've already written to, it says, do you want me to delete everything? I go, yes, please. And what it's doing now is it's actually going through this process of generating my IPD. There we go, lovely 5 seconds to do that. And if I open that location, here's my IPD, and you can see I've got an IPD.R4i file. If I double click onto this, it will actually launch R4i Viewer, and it will then give me that content. But inside my Files section, here's all of my data modules that I've selected. So it's bundled everything up into a deliverable. So if I just double click onto my .R4i, what will happen with that is R4i Viewer is now going to load, and once it's loaded, I'll then be able to display what's actually happening with that. So I've just had a splash. It's actually displaying on my primary screen, but it's just the R4i icon, and here we go. Here's our R4i Viewer, and you can see that I've got an IPD folder, and when I click onto that IPD folder, it actually displays all of the content that has been included in that IPD. And let's pick on something that I don't normally open, so we'll see what happens with this one. As I usually do the extinguisher instead of anything else. Okay, so here we go. Here you can see, so the graphic has automatically opened and it's on our left-hand side of our screen. Because it's a CGM, obviously if we come on here, I can zoom in and zoom out. But I've also got my hotspots, and if I point to the hotspot in the graphic, you can see that it highlights the information in the table. So as I move to each individual hotspot, it shows each of these in my content. Additionally, if I point to the line in the table, you can also see that it highlights it in the graphic. So this is where we've got our bidirectional presentation. And we've obviously set it up so that they're different colours, so you can identify which one is which.
So different direction there, Rita. I see if you're clicking on the table, it highlights it in black, and it's more of an orange colour on the graphic. But if you
Correct.
click on the the image, it goes the other way around and does the orange highlighter on the table with the red on the graphic.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you've got that. Additionally, this is our first gen method, but we've also got a pick list. So we've got a little shopping cart, so you can actually generate a shopping cart. So with this one, you can generate this and then simply click onto print, and that would then give you your pick list that you could then take to your stores area. So if you needed to do this particular or build this particular component, you could then generate that pick list, take it into the stores. They would then collect and collate everything and issue you with all of that equipment or all of that objects, and you would then be able to walk away with all of that to start building this component. So this was first gen. Nowadays we've also got our second gen method, which is if you're doing it in online mode, so instead of just double clicking onto the R4i icon or file in the IETP, you actually connect online to the IETP, and with that we can actually have the ability to look into your stores and identify how many of those parts do we have, and you can then either order them or send in a request. So we've got both of those options. Additionally, if there were links inside this IETP, so if this allowed us to navigate further down, we could have a link here that could take us down into a smaller assembly, or we could also have PDF links in our external tech pubs as well. So it really depends on what is the information that we need and what do we have to do with that content. So it's all about how do we need this content to be managed from the parts database or the PLM into IPD data modules, and then from there into a deliverable so that we can actually see this content. Okay. So that kind of brings us to any questions, Cami?
Okay, thanks, Rita. So hopefully everyone enjoyed that session. As we said, the previous time we've run the IPD webinar, we have focused on the mapping side of the house. So, you know, the actual more technical angle on taking what information you happen to be getting out of your part system, PLM, CAD/CAM type system, and how you work within the wizard to do the mapping process and then producing the IPD data modules. So this one we wanted to focus a little bit more on the entire workflow. People sort of went, okay, that's really cool. I've now got an IPD data module, now what? So we thought, okay, we'll focus more on the entire flow of, okay, how you can have it sit, monitor, how it can run on its own, where it places the content, and what the end result is when we've published it out into the IETP viewer. So if you also wanted to look at the previous version of the IPD webinar session that has a bit more focus on the mapping, that's also available. One of the things that we do highlight to customers and highly recommend as well when we sell IPD Manager is because the training session, as far as you saw, Rita went through, here's the options. Do you want it to auto check-in? Do you want it to auto publish? You know, where's the folder for monitoring? Is really quite simple. It's quite a fast class. We run it in like an hour and a half as a virtual. And so instead, though, we recommend about 8 hours consulting where we assist you in analysing what the engineering team are going to supply you and preparing to do that mapping, getting that mapping done for you, test it, and then we run the training with you so that you've got your own custom map file ready to go. So normally when we sell IPD Manager, because there's not really much to do as a user, it's all really on the preparation side of the house. We do recommend 1 day's consulting so that we can get you all configured, and then when you run the training, you run it with your own configuration. So, which is a much better outcome for everyone. So, yes, we have time for a few more minutes left to have some questions if there are any today. And, yeah, So, Rita, we've just had a question on how difficult is it to update. So if there's been a change to a part number, etc., what would be the normal process that would occur if a part had changed?
You simply go through and export the data out of your parts database again, and then once you've done that, you can let IPD Manager run that process. And because the CSDB is a content management system, and if it's the same part number, obviously it's going to end up with the same data module code, or if it's part of the same piece of content that you've already got.
Yep.
So then the internal version number of the data module will automatically increment, and if you don't have the publish flag turned on, your QA process would allow you to be able to look at the updated data, verify if it's all correct, and if it is, then you could go through that process of publish it and include it into an IETP. So your same processes that you would do with any other update of data. You do the analysis and verify that it's all correct, and then mark it as published and put it into your next deliverable.
So really it's giving us the, as we said, Rita, the same sort of system or component that you're looking at. It would really be the same IPD data module, but the parts information would be updated. So as you said, that's a the CSDB knows that when you check it in, so you're really doing a uprev of that content. So it's really a overwrite as such, and but the archived version of the IPD data module remains in the CSDB because of the fact that it does do content management.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So you'll be able to see every version of it.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So really it's like you said, just leave IPD to monitor that folder, and if the engineers do an update, it's going to drop into that folder, process it, and then the R4i CSDB takes control of all the revision control and all your steps from there.
Absolutely. And one of the options you could have is obviously that folder. If I just bring the CSDB back up again, the folder that those data modules land in, that may not be where you want to keep them. You might want to actually move them so that they're in part of the publication structure itself, just so that you don't forget to include them in an IETP.
Mm-hmm.
So if the data has been reprocessed, what's going to happen is during that check-in process, the data module itself is going to be physically moved from where it was to this date time folder. So again, that would be another flag for you to say, oh, this is new content that we've received. Yep. So we need to go through and do that verification.
Verify. Yep. And another question came in on that, on if, of course, there was updates with the part accordingly. I think that's supposed to be marked. Would it mark the mod, I think, like as in change mark?
No, it won't do that. That would have to be part of that communication process, because obviously you're not just going to have random changes made inside the data or the parts database. There'd obviously be some sort of engineering process. So there's more than just IPD data modules need to change and be updated with new parts information. Mm-hmm. There's going to be associated files that go with that parts data that's also going to require change markup. But no, at this point in time, IPD Manager doesn't do change markup. I suppose, depending on what sort of information we've got inside the spreadsheet, it might be possible for it to be used, but that would have to be an enhancement request. But yeah,
because I guess in theory it's just mapping to a to an element, isn't it? So, but you'd have to have something in the content that's actually coming out from engineering that would be able to pick it up and know which parts had actually physically been changed. So yeah, it would require some handling on the engineering side of the house to highlight it.
Absolutely. We'd need to have some more discussion on that. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it's not feasible. It's just that we'd need to have a little bit more of an understanding. How does the parts database know that that part number has changed? So, yeah, we'd need to have that. But as I said, there wouldn't be just IPD data modules that would be affected by this. There could be a whole range.
Yeah.
There's all the procedures that are associated with that part as well.
Yep. yeah, it tends to be a bigger picture for an entire IETP set. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We're kind of looking at this as a little standalone, I just want to produce IPD data.
And the reality is, the
reality is a little bit different to that.
Yeah, ironically, James' comment earlier in the piece that, often, an LSA is part of that process with customers as well, and so you get the benefit, I guess, of when you extract from an LSA, you're getting that procedural content change with the parts change at the same time, and they do have the ability to mark revisions in an LSA. So
absolutely,
yes. So different tools and where it's coming from, but yes, it's a good question. Certainly, from what we've seen with customers that use IPD at the moment, their engineering CAD/CAM systems, etc., don't seem to actually highlight when the data comes out that there has specifically been a part change. But so it really comes down to what information you're being handed to what we can do with it. So
correct. Yep.
Excellent. Okay. So I think that's probably about it on the questions today, Rita. So I'll just do a little bit of closing housekeeping while we see if there are any other questions. So on the screen here we have Rita and my contact details, and we have highlighted the new training contact information with the new Pennant, plc.com. And also we wanted to highlight that last week our team, which the R4i software team, has been merged with Pennant's Omega PS team, so the other software division part of Pennant. And we now have a joint website, which is pennant-ips.com at the bottom there. So go check out our new website. It's going to have all the same sort of facilities that we've had in the past. You can log into your support portals from up there. We will be continuing to do blogging and webinars. Of course, the benefit will be that we will be having a broader base of blogs and webinar sessions going on, so not just around sort of S1000D and STE and the R4i products, but also around the Omega product range, the S series, the entire S series specs, including S3000L, 2000M. So we'll have specialists basically sharing their wisdom on a broader range of the S series specs and the other products in our Pennant family. So we're looking forward to having a nice broad base of webinars running for the rest of this year, which will be fantastic. So do connect with us if you have any other questions after the session. There is a short survey, just 3 questions at the end, of which one allows you to put any additional notes in if you would like to request any of the other webinars or need any other information around IPD or the other Pennant products. So on that note, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Rita, for sharing your wisdom with us today, and we look forward to seeing everyone at our next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.